So the thing a thing that's on my mind is the convoluted nature of spirituality as it is today happens to be that way because of the intellectual jargon that we find ourselves facing. Everyone's always a philosopher or a teacher. I mean, you look on social media today and so many people are just describing what they think they're supposed to. It's like they're reliving quotations of what their life should be and what should be going on inside of themselves. When the truth, known to the people that really know them or really know them, and I think even more so to themselves, is oftentimes very, very different. We pretend the games that we think we're supposed to play. We run routines and rituals that we're being taught by a society that is so overflooded with self-help. Everyone trying to tell us how to live our lives, how to think, how to approach relationships, how to approach business, how to approach diet, health, everything, as if we're not inherently capable of doing these things, as if we're by default faulty. But what is the origin of all knowledge then? What is the originator of every single idea and every book? Is it not another human being, another person going through experiences, pains and tortures, and living a semicolon life that seems to presuppose some other idea that they think is clever but is really the repetition of someone else? And then we look in this journey for identity and we try to find it within the association of who we are socially or who we are financially and who we are based on who we're dating or who we're seen with and how we're acting and even what music we listen to, how we dress. Yeah, spirituality, something that I realized a long time ago, was the evolution of the self. It was the evolution of the identity. When I say spirituality, I'm not defining religion at all. I'm simply stating that how we grow, that inner development as human beings, going from a place where we are immature and desperate in the world, seeking validation from people that don't really matter in the long run, from marketing and from institutions that are in fact so disconnected from us. And it's in the attempt to find that validation that we ourselves find ourselves to be even more disconnected, because we're trying to find it from something that's completely devoid of soul, devoid of spirit, devoid of any true emotional experience. And it reminds me of someone that I had the great fortune of encountering that gave me the glory of satisfying pain. And when I say satisfying pain, I mean it's that moment when somebody rips your heart from your chest and shows it to you and looks straight into your face, and you recognize that the person you thought wasn't there. And there's magic in that, there's beauty in that, there's glory inside of the suffering for that. And it sounds like I'm going off on a tangent, but what I'm really doing is I'm painting a picture. And it's the picture of where the identity really is seated, because it's not seated in the mind, or it's not seated in the intellect, rather. It's not seated in the momentary, moment-to-moment attempt to try and version ourselves based upon who we are with our family and who we are with our friends and who we are when we're sitting at our desk or when we're busy with work or who we are when we're on our stage. I think the only place to really find out who we are is in the moments that we break. Because it's in the moments that we shatter, that we fall apart completely, that we have a very clear vision of who we are. And there was a beautiful piece of lyric that always seems to connect with me every time I hear it or read it. And it's the notion of that only that which is broken is really open. And that's really how we are as human beings. It's only in the moments that we're shattered. And if we're not completely burned away, but we're actually burning away the illusion and burning away the lie of who we've been telling ourselves we are, who we've been telling ourselves other people were, the self-induced hypnotic coma that we tend to thrive upon as a society, so that we can live the television dream, the hallucination, because we're desperately trying to find a map that works when the map itself is just, it's not the territory, as we say in NLP. And that is what frustrates us. That's part of what frustrates us. But it's in those moments. And so when I reflect back upon the idea of identity being the core of spiritual growth, that the way you've developed spiritually is really based upon who you are and where you are at that point of that shattered nature. You see, because the beauty of the heartbreak is that the first time it happens, or the first few times it happens, you're in rage, you're in frustration, you're a molten, blazing furnace of fire, your ashes crashing down to the floor. But at some point you become the phoenix, and at some point you rise up, and it's like the ocean opens and the waves crash over you, and you systematically get washed clean, and you realize that what you thought was everything, what you thought was your entire world, was just a fragment. And it's now that fragment that comes up to make this new diamond, this new possibility of the true self. An illusion that most people get when they enter a realm of spiritual seeking is that they look at the idea of finding the true self, or finding the higher self, or the perfect self. But the truth is, this thing doesn't exist in a predefined form. Because it's through the pain, it's through the breaking, it's through the shattering that we find it, or that we define it. It reminds me of an interpretation I once read about, in the biblical context, where Moses approaches the burning bush and he says, what is your name? And the interpretation is Ayir Shirayir, which is oftentimes translated as I am, but the actual translation is I will be that which I will be. And it shows me such a great intimacy that we have with whatever our interpretation is of the divine and our interpretation of the self, because even the self, this fabric which we are fundamentally, is not really defined. It's defining. As we constantly find ourselves in new expressions and new experiences, we're getting more and more aspects of it. Another interesting idea in neurosciences that kind of lends itself to this is the idea that the neocortex, which is really the personality range of the brain, the logical aware centers, what we call conscious mind, is only able to interpret roughly about 2,000 bits of information, whereas the cerebral, which is very akin to what we would term the unconscious or even subconscious, calculates over 400 billion bits of information. What that kind of alludes to, what that kind of realization does, is the expansion of consciousness has so much to do with who we are. I mean, we go through all these different schools and systems and palettes where everyone goes from everything from yoga, where you're trying to work through your chakras, your sacred centers, or we go through different forms of therapy to try and expand ourselves, or meditative practices, or strange ritualistic expressions and experiences. When a broken heart, sometimes the greatest spiritual teacher, or the pain that you sometimes face in life, because there was a great blessing that comes in terms of pain, and one of these blessings is the raising of the standard. There's this one point that happens whenever you've been hurt really badly, or when you've suffered something, or some stress, or some strain, or some suffering just so much for so long that you just get to that point where you just finally say enough. And it's as much as this is a powerful thing that happened for the Jewish people in the concentration camps, where they just said enough. Like, the people that survived this were people that said they could not let such a tragedy go on in life. And I think the same thing is true in relationships for us today. It's when you're hurt by somebody that really thought loved you and you really thought mattered, and that pain, instead of just going into regret and feeling bad and suddenly judging everyone in the opposite sex or same sex, whatever you're into, instead you use it to drive you to say, that's no longer good enough. That even if the person's beautiful, even if the person is powerful, it no longer matters, because that alone is not worth me, whatever this me, this intangible me is. It's in those moments that I think we define reality, and we are really, in the most real and sincere sense, creators. Because it's those distinctions that we make, it's those heart-shattering moments that are truly the most beautiful and graceful ones of our life. It's in those ones that we find ourselves connecting to something deeper. A voice that says, not now. I'm not giving up. It's like the sun that keeps rising every single day, even when the world feels like it could shatter. It's the force that gets you to continue driving. Because there's something inside each and every one of us that's divine, I believe. I remember listening to an Eben Pagan conversation where he was talking about some of the dramas and the issues that we all face. And one of the things that he said is the more personal, the more universal. And one of the things I've been good at in my life is being damaged beyond repair. I recognized in these moments, in these times, that my suffering, my pain, my therapy lasted as long as I thought that something was wrong with me. that I was somehow broken and I need to get back to fixed. But back to fixed doesn't exist. Nothing goes back to where it was, because it's not supposed to. That's not growth. And that's the problem that people face. It's the problem that we all face sometimes, is we get frozen in a certain way of thinking, in a certain way of living, in a certain way of talking. In these patterns, because they work for a little bit, but there's no life in those. And eventually we find ourselves in empty, dead prisons, repeating rituals with the same inmates. And everyone has this hope somewhere deep inside their eyes. Some has gotten so dull that they don't even see it anymore. That's the true tragedy of life. How often do you find yourself in a pattern in your relationships? When you're out tonight or wherever, and you meet that person or that one individual who walks past you that makes your heart race a little bit, and everything in your head goes, I don't know what to say, probably won't fit, ridiculous. What if that entire illusion of them being about you or above you is actually all a lie, sold by someone else to keep you in a pattern, a program, a routine? What if it's worse? What if it's not someone else? What if it's not some marketer or some Illuminati or some conspiracy theorist? What if it's just you? What if it's all those years that you've just said that you could only have a certain type of relationship with a certain type of person? That you only get the bad side of the stick? What if it's all those times you lied to yourself? What if it's that single lie that haunts us? What if that's the real betrayal? And it's not that person that broke your heart. And it's not that person that stabbed you in the back. Or those people that just used you. What if it's been you? And that's the part that we didn't want to admit to. But what if admitting to it was the first part to healing it? The first part to actually giving a shit about yourself, about your life, and breaking the rules. Because every single thing we're trying to adjust to in the self-help society that tells us the certain way we're supposed to go about meeting women, or women how to meet men, or any of that, it's just repeated jargon from yesterday. How are we ever going to create tomorrow? Because what if you go out and you're clumsy, or you're silly, or you're vulnerable, or you're goofy, or you talk too much, or you don't talk enough, or you blush, or you can't dance, or people laugh when they look at you because you're different? What if that's exactly what's needed for you to find the people that really matter, that are going to bring a tear of joy to your life, that are going to go on adventures with you that you never thought was even possible? What if that's what makes your life change? I remember reading somewhere about a great writer who wrote over 36 books in his life, and everything was safe and everything was right according to the formula. None of them sold. And then one day he had enough. He was just himself. He's just honest. He just accepted who he was, and he just wrote his book. And it was the first one that actually sold and made him a success.